The Silent Watchers. The massive space station Haven's Rest drifted in the neutral zone between three major star systems, its gleaming hull reflecting the light of distant suns. Inside the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations had gathered for an emergency session. The air hummed with tension as voices rose in heated debate, each species demanding their solution be heard above the others. Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat quietly at the human delegation table, her steady gray eyes observing the chaos unfolding around her. She wore a simple navy blue uniform with minimal decorations, her silver hair pulled back in a practical bun. Beside her, two junior diplomats shuffled through digital tablets, but Elena needed no notes. She had memorized every detail of the crisis that brought them here, every failed attempt to stop what was coming. At the center of the hall, a holographic display showed the horrifying reality. Red markers indicated star systems that had simply vanished over the past 6 months. Not destroyed, not conquered, gone. Where thriving worlds once orbited their suns, now only empty space remained. General Thakmor of the Kethran Empire slammed his armored fist against his podium. The 8-foot warrior's 4 arms gestured wildly as his translated voice boomed through the chamber. His species had conquered half the galaxy through pure military might, their battle fleets legendary for their brutality. This void plague must be met with overwhelming force. Thakmor roared, his mandibles clicking with agitation. My battle fleets stand ready. We will launch coordinated strikes against this entity before it consumes more worlds. The Kethran way has never failed us. Across the circular chamber, High Mind Zelani of the Zephyrian Collective floated above her seat, her ethereal form shimmering with psychic energy. When she spoke, her voice echoed directly in the minds of all present, bypassing their ears entirely. Brute force will accomplish nothing against a cosmic entity. Her mental voice carried undertones of ancient wisdom. The collective has analyzed the psychic residue left behind. This plague exists partially outside normal spacetime. We must create barriers in the mental realm, shield our thoughts and dreams from its hunger. Director Vexhai of the Titanus Federation stood next, his cybernetic implants glowing as he interfaced directly with the station's systems. Half of his species had replaced their organic parts with advanced technology, becoming living computers capable of calculations beyond imagination. Your solutions are both primitive. Vexhai's synthesized voice carried no emotion. We have constructed quantum resonance generators that can disrupt the entity's molecular cohesion. Technology, not mysticism or barbarism, will save us all. The debate continued for hours. The crystalline Hartani suggested harmonic frequencies. The aquatic depth swimmers proposed temporal displacement. The hive-minded sectai offered to sacrifice entire colonies as bait. Each species presented their solution with absolute confidence, dismissing all others as inferior. Throughout the chaos, Elena remained silent. She knew what was coming. It happened at every major gathering where humans dared to show their faces among the galactic powers. The mockery was as predictable as stellar radiation. General Thakmor's laughter was like grinding metal. "And what of the humans?" he asked, his 4 eyes focusing on Elena with predatory amusement. "Will they contribute their mighty merchant vessels to our war effort? Perhaps they'll negotiate a peace treaty with the cosmic horror." High Mind Zelani's psychic laughter rippled through the chamber like cold wind. The silent ones speak so rarely, we sometimes forget they're present. Tell us, little ambassador, will humanity offer to mediate between us and the entity that devours worlds? The hall erupted in laughter. The insectoid sectai clicked their mandibles in harsh rhythm. The Hartani chimed like broken bells. Even the normally stoic Titanus Federation emitted electronic sounds that resembled mirth. Elena stood slowly, her movement graceful and controlled. The laughter gradually died as she walked to the center of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. When she spoke, her voice was calm and clear, carrying easily to every corner of the vast hall. "The Human Federation offers our full support in addressing this crisis," she said simply. Our research divisions have been studying the disappearances since they began. We believe we have resources that might prove valuable in the coming conflict. General Thackmore snorted, a sound like steam escaping from a pressure valve. Resources? What resources could humans possibly offer? Your species has never won a significant military engagement. You avoid conflict at every opportunity. When the Kethran and Zephyrian fought their century-long war, where were the humans? When the Titanis and Hartani disputed the Omega Sector, where were the humans? You hide behind trade agreements and diplomatic immunity. Director Vexay's optical sensors focused on Elena with mechanical precision. Humans are merchants and mediators. This situation requires warriors and scientists. We appreciate your peaceful nature, but this threat is beyond your capabilities. High Mind Zalani's form pulsed with brighter psychic energy. While we prepare for war, will you prepare negotiation tables? This enemy does not communicate, it consumes. There is no diplomacy with hunger itself. Elena's expression remained neutral, but those who knew her well might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. We understand your concerns. However, we believe that different approaches to problem-solving can be complementary. Humanity requests permission to contribute our unique perspective to the defense effort. The Sektai Queen spoke for the first time, her voice a sharp chittering that the translation systems rendered as cold, mechanical words. My scouts have observed the aftermath. Worlds stripped to their core, not even atoms remaining. This is not a political problem requiring human subtlety. This is survival. Captain James Mitchell watched the proceedings from the observation deck high above the chamber floor. He wore the simple uniform of a human cargo ship captain, but his eyes held the calculating look of a career military officer. His fingers drummed silently against the railing as he observed the alien's dismissive treatment of Ambassador Vasquez. Mitchell touched his earpiece, activating a secure quantum-encrypted channel. Control, this is Shadow Wash. The diplomatic approach is proceeding as predicted. Ambassador Vasquez is maintaining her cover, but they're moving toward formal exclusion. A voice crackled back through the encrypted line. Copy that. Shadow Watch. Admiral Chen wants to know if we should accelerate the timeline. Mitchell watched as General Thackmore stood again, his massive form radiating authority and contempt. I call for a formal vote, the Kethran declared. We will establish the Galactic Defense Coalition today. All military-capable species will contribute ships, weapons, and personnel. He paused for dramatic effect, his four eyes gleaming with malicious amusement. The humans will continue their valuable work managing supply lines while real warriors handle the fighting. The vote was swift and brutal. Every species voted in favor of the coalition. Only the humans abstained. High Mind Zalani addressed Elena directly, her psychic voice carrying undertones of patronizing sympathy. You may observe our military preparations. Someone needs to coordinate logistics and supply routes. It's what humans do best. Elena bowed her head slightly, accepting the dismissal with apparent grace. The Human Federation appreciates your consideration. We will continue to monitor the situation and provide whatever assistance we can. As the assembly broke into smaller groups discussing fleet compositions and battle strategies, Elena walked calmly back to her table. Her junior diplomats looked upset and humiliated, but she simply gathered her materials and prepared to leave. Ambassador, whispered Junior Diplomat Park, his voice barely audible. Shouldn't we protest? This is humiliating. They're treating us like servants. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes the best response to mockery is patience. Let them have their moment of superiority. Pride comes before the fall. Captain Mitchell made his way down to the chamber floor as delegates began filing out. He approached Elena's table casually, like any merchant captain seeking to discuss shipping contracts. Ambassador Vasquez, he said, his voice carrying just the right tone of businesslike respect. My ship is ready for departure when you are. The route to Sol should be clear. Helena nodded professionally. Thank you, Captain Mitchell. I believe our business here is concluded. As they walked toward the docking bays, Mitchell leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The packages you requested have been delivered to all designated coordinates. Phase 1 is complete. And Phase 2. Admiral Chen reports all units are in position across 17 sectors. We're just waiting for the signal." They reached the docking bay where the human vessel Quiet Commerce waited. It looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A mid-sized cargo ship with basic defensive systems and minimal crew quarters. Nothing that would threaten anyone or draw unwanted attention. As their ship undocked from Haven's Rest, Elena stood on the bridge watching the massive station shrink behind them. Junior Diplomat Park approached her hesitantly. "Ambassador, with all respect, shouldn't we have demanded equal treatment? They basically called us cowards and servants." Elena turned to face the young man, and for the first time that day, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Mr. Park, do you know why I became an ambassador? To serve humanity's interests through peaceful diplomacy. I became an ambassador because I was tired of war. I spent 20 years in the Human Defense Corps before switching to the diplomatic service. I've commanded destroyers in 3 different conflicts. I've seen what humans are capable of when pushed too far." She turned back to the viewport, watching the stars wheel past. "These aliens think they know us. They see our merchant ships and peaceful colonies and assume we're weak. They've never bothered to ask why a species that avoids conflict has survived and thrived in a galaxy full of predators." Mitchell joined them on the bridge, his expression grim. "The alien fleets are mobilizing. Intelligence reports suggest they'll encounter the Void Plague within 48 hours. Elena nodded slowly. "And our people?" "Ready and waiting. Dr. Harrison's research teams have confirmed the entity's weaknesses. Admiral Chen has positioned the fleet according to tactical projections developed over the past decade. We'll know soon enough whether 30 years of preparation will be sufficient." Park looked confused and increasingly alarmed. 30 years? What preparation? "Ambassador, what's really going on?" Elena and Mitchell exchanged glances. Mitchell spoke first. "Tell him, Ambassador. He has clearance now." Elena sighed deeply. "Mr. Park, do you remember the Kepler colony incident 40 years ago? When the human settlement on Kepler 442 bits went silent?" "Yes, of course. Official records say it was a solar flare event." "It wasn't a solar flare. It was the first Void Plague scout. The colony managed to send one message before they were consumed. It eats everything. It's coming. We've been preparing for this day ever since." The young diplomat sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "You mean we've known about this threat for 4 decades and said nothing?" Mitchell activated a wall display showing a tactical map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of recent Void Plague attacks. Blue dots showed the positions of alien defense fleets gathering for their assault. Green dots, nearly invisible among the stars, marked human positions. "We said nothing because we were learning, studying, preparing. The aliens mock us for avoiding their wars, but every conflict they've fought has taught us something about their capabilities, their strategies, their weaknesses. We've been playing a very long game, Mr. Park." Elena pointed to the display. "The Ketharan are excellent at direct assault, but terrible at adapting to unexpected tactics. The Zephyrians have powerful psychic abilities, but rely too heavily on them when faced with something beyond mental influence. The Titanus process information incredibly quickly but follow predictable logical patterns." She highlighted different sections of the map as she spoke. "We've cataloged every strength and every weakness of every major species in this galaxy. But more importantly, we've studied the Void Plague itself." "But why?" Park asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why not just tell them about the threat from the beginning? Why let them exclude us?" "Because they would have done exactly what they're doing now, charging in with overwhelming force, confident in their superiority. The Void Plague has consumed 23 different civilizations across 4 galaxies. It's seen every conventional tactic, every traditional strategy. Brute force, psychic barriers, technological superiority. It's devoured species that excelled at all of these approaches. Mitchell highlighted a section of the map showing the projected engagement zone. The alien fleets will engage the entity here, in the Vega sector. Based on our analysis of previous encounters, they'll inflict minimal damage before being routed. The Void Plague will pursue them toward the core systems, growing stronger with each world it consumes. And then, Park asked, though he was beginning to understand the horrifying scope of what he was learning. Elena's smile returned, cold and predatory. Then we show them what the Silent Ones have been preparing for all these years. The last gambit. The emergency klaxon aboard the Kethran Dreadnought Worldbreaker had been sounding for 6 hours. General Thakmore stood on his command bridge, his forearms gripping support rails as his flagship shuddered under impossible forces. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, their mandibles clicking in distress. Status report. Thakmore bellowed over the noise. His tactical officer, a younger Kethran with fresh battle scars, turned from his console with fear in his 4 eyes. General, we've lost 60% of our fleet. The entity isn't responding to any of our weapons. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, even our gravity bombs. Nothing penetrates its defenses. Through the main view screen, Thakmore could see the Void Plague in all its terrible glory. It wasn't a ship or a creature in any sense they understood. It was a writhing mass of absolute darkness that seemed to devour light itself, growing larger with each ship it consumed. Tendrils of nothingness reached out across space, and anything they touched simply ceased to exist. What about our allies? Thakmore demanded. The Zephyrian fleet is in full retreat. High Mind Zelani reports that the entity is immune to psychic influence. In fact, it seems to feed on psychic energy. The more power they directed at it, the stronger it became. Another shudder rocked the ship as a void tendril swept past, missing them by mere kilometers. Where it passed, 3 Kethran destroyers vanished without even debris remaining. And the Titaness. Director Vexhay's quantum resonance generators had no effect. The entity exists partially outside normal spacetime, just as the Zephyrians predicted, but their technological solutions proved equally useless. The Titanus Dreadnought calculated precision was consumed 40 minutes ago. Thakmore felt something he had never experienced in 2 centuries of warfare. True helplessness. His species had conquered half the galaxy through superior firepower and tactical brilliance, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for an enemy that simply absorbed everything thrown at it. General, his communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission on emergency frequencies." It's from the human ambassador. Thakmore's first instinct was to ignore it. What could the Silent Ones possibly offer when the galaxy's mightiest fleets were being systematically destroyed? But desperate times called for any option, no matter how unlikely. Put her through. Ambassador Elena Vasquez appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the bridge of her cargo ship. Behind her, Thakmore could see what looked like a standard merchant vessel's control room. Simple, functional, unimpressive. "General Thakmore," Elena said, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism she had displayed during the assembly. "I'm sorry to see your fleet in such distress. The Human Federation would like to offer assistance." Thakmore's anger flared despite his desperate situation. "Assistance? Your cargo ships against a cosmic horror. Human, this is no time for your diplomatic games. My warriors are dying." Elena's expression didn't change. "I understand your frustration, General. However, I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human capabilities. Would you be willing to accept our help if we could demonstrate that we're not quite what we appear to be?" Before Thakmore could respond, his tactical officer shouted in alarm, "General, new contacts on long-range sensors. Massive energy signatures approaching from 17 different vectors." The main screen split to show the tactical display. Across a 3-dimensional map of local space, green dots were appearing by the hundreds. Ships were decloaking throughout the entire sector. Not the small merchant vessels everyone expected from humanity, but massive warships unlike anything in the galactic databases. Thakmor stared in disbelief as the true human fleet revealed itself. Dreadnoughts the size of small moons, their hull designs unlike anything he had ever seen. Instead of the aggressive angular lines favored by most military species, these ships had flowing, organic curves that seemed to bend light around them. They moved with impossible grace for vessels of their size, their formations perfect and coordinated. "What is this?" Thakmor whispered. Alina's image smiled sadly. "This is what the Silent Ones have been preparing for 30 years, General. We call it the Last Gambit." High Mind Zelani's psychic voice suddenly echoed across all communication channels, reaching every surviving ship in the Allied fleet. Her mental tone carried shock and something approaching awe. "Impossible. I cannot read them. Every human vessel is psychically invisible. How are they shielding their minds from the collective sight?" Director Vexhay's synthesized voice joined the communication. "Their technology is beyond our understanding. My sensors cannot penetrate their hull composition. These are not the primitive ships we cataloged in our databases." Alina's voice cut through the confusion. "We've been studying the Void Plague for 4 decades, ever since it destroyed our first colony. We learned that it feeds on aggression, on the desire to dominate and conquer. Every weapon you fired at it, every thought of victory and glory, has only made it stronger." On the tactical display, the human fleet had formed a perfect sphere around the Void Plague, maintaining precise distances from each other and the entity. Instead of charging forward with weapons blazing, they simply held position. "What are they doing?" Thakmor demanded. "What humans do best," Alina replied. "We're thinking." From the human dreadnought Enduring Hope, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the Void Plague through sensors that had been designed specifically for this moment. Unlike the aggressive postures of the alien fleets, her bridge was quiet, almost meditative. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "Project Harmony is initialized and awaiting your command." Admiral Chen had spent her entire career preparing for this day. She had studied every recorded encounter with the Void Plague, analyzed every failure, learned from every tragedy. The entity fed on conflict, on the aggressive instincts that drove most spacefaring species to expand and conquer. But humans had learned something else during their journey to the stars: the power of unity and willing sacrifice. "Begin the Harmony Protocol," Chen ordered quietly. Across the human fleet, a transformation began. Instead of weapons charging or shields strengthening, each ship began to emit a soft, golden light. It wasn't energy in any conventional sense. It was something far more fundamental. It was the collective will of humanity, focused through technology that merged quantum mechanics with something approaching philosophy. The human ships began to sing. It started as a barely perceptible harmonic frequency, but grew stronger as more vessels joined in. The sound carried across space in ways that conventional physics couldn't explain, not through radio waves or psychic energy, but through the fundamental vibrations that connected all living things. Inside the Void Plague, something unprecedented happened. For the first time in its existence across multiple galaxies, the entity encountered something it couldn't consume. The song of the human fleet wasn't aggression to be absorbed or technology to be devoured. It was pure sacrifice, the willing offering of themselves not for conquest or glory, but to protect others. The darkness began to recoil. "Impossible." High Mind's Zelani's psychic voice carried wonder and disbelief. "The entity is retreating. How are they accomplishing this?" Alina's voice carried across all channels, calm and sure. "The Void Plague exists because it consumes the aggressive instincts of spacefaring species. It grows stronger from our desire to fight, to conquer, to prove our superiority. But humanity learned something different during our expansion into space. The golden light from the human fleet grew brighter, and the darkness of the Void Plague began to shrink visibly. We learned that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from protecting them. Not from taking, but from giving. The entity cannot consume what is freely offered in service to others. General Thakmor watched in amazement as the cosmic horror that had destroyed his fleet began to collapse in on itself. The writhing tendrils of nothingness were pulling back, retreating from the sphere of human ships. But at what cost? Director Vexhay's sensors were finally penetrating the human ships as their defensive systems focused entirely on the Harmony Protocol. Their crews, they're dying. The energy output required for this effect is consuming their life force. Alina's image flickered on the screen, and Thakmor could see that she too was growing weaker. The effort wasn't limited to the military vessels. Every human in space was contributing to the Harmony, offering their life energy to power humanity's last gambit. The willing sacrifice of the few to save the many, Alina said, her voice growing faint. This is what you never understood about the Silent Ones. We weren't weak because we avoided your wars. We were preparing to fight the one war that truly mattered. The Void Plague let out a sound that registered on every sensor array in the sector. Not a roar of anger or hunger, but something approaching surprise. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered prey that willingly offered itself not for conquest, but for protection of others. It was a concept so alien to its nature that it couldn't process the information. The entity began to tear itself apart. Admiral Chen's voice carried across the tactical network as her ship's lights began to dim. All vessels, maintain harmony. We're almost through. Remember why we're here. Not for glory, not for victory, but for everyone who comes after us. Alina's image appeared on screen one final time, broadcasting from her cargo ship, which had also participated in the Harmony. She looked exhausted, aged by the effort, but alive. We rid you, General. The immediate threat has been neutralized. At the cost of hundreds of thousands of human lives, High Mind Zilani's psychic voice carried deep respect and sorrow. Why? Why sacrifice so much for species that mocked and dismissed you? Alina's smile was tired but genuine. Because that's what humans do. We protect those who cannot protect themselves, even when they don't appreciate it. Especially when they don't appreciate it. Director Vexhay's synthesized voice carried something approaching emotion. We underestimated your species catastrophically. Your technology, your strategy, your sacrifice. How long have you been preparing for this? Since the day we learned the Void Plague existed, we spent 40 years studying not just the entity, but ourselves. We had to become something more than just another aggressive species if we were going to succeed where 23 civilizations had failed. The human dreadnought Enduring Hope limped toward the Allied fleet, its hull scared but intact. Admiral Chen's voice joined the communication network. The Void Plague is destroyed, but the harmony required to defeat it has changed us all. Humanity can never again be what we were before this day. We have given too much of ourselves. General Thakmor felt something he had never experienced toward any other species, genuine respect and gratitude. What can we do? How can we repay this sacrifice? Alina's image began to fade as her ship's power systems finally failed. Remember us not as the Silent Ones, but as the species that proved strength comes from protecting others, not conquering them. And perhaps you might consider that the next time you're tempted to dismiss someone based on their apparent weakness. Her final words echoed across the communication network as the human vessels began their slow journey home. The loudest roar often comes from the emptiest cave, but those who truly hold power rarely need to announce it. In the years that followed, the Galactic Council would establish the Vasquez Protocols, named after the ambassador who had represented humanity in its finest hour. The protocols mandated that no species could be excluded from galactic decisions based on perceived military weakness. But more importantly, the surviving species began to understand that in a galaxy full of predators, sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who choose not to roar until the moment when their voice truly matters. The Silent Ones had spoken at last, and the galaxy would never forget their words.